Hey, welcome back Python Pioneers, and in this video we're going to be taking a look at common operations with lists. Okay, so I've got a list over here on the left that I'm going to be referencing just so I stay on track. We talked about using the the square brackets on a list to access one of the elements in the list based on its index. We start at the 0 index, right? So cat is 0, 10 is 1, pencil is 2, 45.3 is 3, as far as the index is concerned. What if I want to get a range of indexes? So if we want to do that, we just add in a colon. So we tell it where do we want to start and where do we want to end. So if I say I want to start at the first index, which is 0, and let's go to the second, I guess I need to use my words different, but let's say we want to go from the 0th index to the second index. And let's print that just so we can see what it looks like. What are we getting? We get cat and 10. Weird, right? It's like, wait, I thought this was 0, 1, 2. So it starts at wherever you tell it, and it ends wherever you tell it, but it doesn't include where you end. So if I say 0 through 3, I'll get 0, 1, and 2, but I won't get 3. If that makes sense. But if I say start at 1, it will actually get that element. So I get 10 and pencil, right? Because this is 0, 1, 2, 3. So 1 and 2 would be included, but 3 wouldn't. So just remember when you're using slice with the colon here, when you're slicing up a list, the first number you provide is where you start and it's included, and the second number you provide after the colon is where you end and it's not included. So up until that index you get everything, but you stop there and you don't get that one. Okay. Another cool thing you can do with lists that's really nice, I could say, let's just keep using print because you can see the values. I can check if a value is in a list, and it reads very nicely. So I can say cat, and then I can literally just say in my list, and it will return true if cat is in my list, and it will return false if it's not. Cat is in my list. So it's true. What if I put, actually I think it does value error if it's not. Let's see. No, false. Okay, there you go. Good. I think that I've got that one mixed in with a different one. So basically the idea is, though, you can use this word in and check if a value is in your list. So just imagine you have a list that's got 10,000 items in it. Do you want to set up a for loop and go check every single value and see, like, is it in there? It's just like, oof, I don't want to do all that. You don't have to. You could actually literally just write out if, this value, whatever it is in my list. Maybe you want to only have unique items in your list, for example. And you could say, what if I want to only add something to my list if it's not already in there? So let's see what that would look like. I could say if, let's get some value from the user. We'll just get some value from the user, and then we'll say if the user input is not in my list, let's add it to my list. And we'll just, well, we haven't talked about it yet, but we're going to in a little bit, so I guess I won't use append, but we're going to in the next video. But for now, I'm just going to use insert because we did talk about that one. And I'm going to insert it at the very front. So everything else is going to shift. And put in the index you want to insert it in, right? And then put in the value you want to insert. So if the user input is not in my list, put it at the front of my list. Otherwise, don't do anything. So then if I print out the list, let's see what happens. If I type in cat, nothing happens, right? That the list stays exactly how I made it in the beginning. What if I type in my name? It inserts my name. Pretty cool. So I don't even have to know how many items are in the list. I don't have to think about any of that. All I can do is literally just type out not in, and it checks like, hey, is that value in this list? And obviously you can do it the other way with in. One of the other cool things you can do with in is for, and that is super nice. So if you don't need the index of the list, you could say for, and you create a variable now. So whatever you want to call each item in your list, whatever makes sense based on what's in your list. In this case, our list is kind of random. It's numbers and then random words. So I'm literally just going to create my variable and call it item. And then I'm going to say for item in my list, print item. And literally all that will do is print every item in the list. Oh, and I'm getting input. I don't want to do that anymore. See, cat 10, pencil 45.3. Very interesting. So we can actually loop through and see every item in the list. Obviously, the way we talked about before, if you want to get the index, if you need to work with the index for a list, then you should say for index. And this is a variable, right? So the in is still in use here, right? But the way we had looked at before was by typing range, remember? And then we just said, hey, the range, and then for range, we just passed in the length of the list. And we know that it's going to basically loop that many times. And then, if you print that, index is literally just going to count. It's going to count 0, 1, 2, 3 because there's 4 items. But then, with your list, you could actually index into your list and print out that index, right? So let me do that in the print. Right, that's what we looked at before. So I could print every index in the list. Works the same. That's useful if you have 2 different lists that you need to access and the data lines up. So like, for example, let's do an example real quick. Let's say we have, like we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but let's say we have a list of expenses and we have a list of their descriptions. I'm not going to say I'm going to say expenses and descriptions. And I don't want to type all that out actually either. Expend and descript. We know those stand for expenses and descriptions. So what we're going to do is, let's say we have a series of expenses here, and I'm not going to do the work of asking for input and all that, but let's just do an example with like 3 of them. No, let's do like 4. So 20, because I want to show you something. I'm going to show you how to go through this and find how to work with these multiple lists like this. So then let's do 5.21, 1,000.26. Okay, that's good. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for description, we'll just give each of these descriptions. These descriptions are going to match up to the numbers. So we'll say tacos was $18.70. burgers was $25. Those burgers get you. And $5 was a bottle of water. Expensive these days. And $1,000 was what's $1,000? We'll say rent. Okay. So what we want to do is, let me put this equals in here actually. How can I index through and find the top values in these two different lists? Maybe I want to figure out what my top 2 expenses are, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for, and I'm going to say I'm just saying I as a variable name because I don't want to type out index. And I'm going to use the range function on expense, but I want to use it on the length of expend. So how many items are in there? There's 4. So for I in the range of 4, which would be 0, 1, 2, 3. Now I can use that number to index into my list. And I can just check, and I'm going to have highest expense is 0. We'll start at 0. And second highest, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to call it expense 1. That'll be my highest. And expense 2 will be my second highest, just so it looks nicer. Okay. And what I'm going to check, and I'm going to try to find the top 2 most expensive things I bought, right? And what if this list had 1,000 things in it, right? Right now it's pretty easy. You could just look at it, but how could I write a program that could look through it for me? So what I'll do is look through the range, right? And I'm going to check and see. Currently, I'm trying to find the first expense, so I'm going to have to loop through this twice, actually, because I need to loop through, find the highest expense, then I need to get rid of that expense, and then loop through again and find the new highest expense. So we're going to do quite a few things here, which some of the things we want to cover in this video. One of them being, how do you delete? So, okay. So the current expense is 1. We're trying to find the first expense. Let's say while current expense is less than equal to 2. Yeah, because we're just trying to find 2. And then inside of here, we're going to loop through the range. And if notice how the for loop is indented in, right? So inside of this while loop, is the current expense less than or equal to 2? Yes, it's 1. So it's going to run, and then we're going to go in and say, if expend at I, so if the expense list at the ith index, which will be 0, is greater than expense 1, which it will be, right? Because it's set to 0. Then we want to set expense 1 equal to the value that's stored at expense I, right? Okay, so what is that going to do? Well, the first one, it's always going to be greater than 0, hopefully. Well, actually, you know, it would be nice to have a negative expense because that means you got paid. But in this case, we're keeping track of expenses, so they're all positive. So the first one will always be true. Expense 1 is going to be set to 18.7. Then on the next time the for loop runs, I will equal 1. It's going to get 25.8 as the value, and it's going to check, is 25.8 greater than 18.7 that's stored in expense 1? Yes, it is. So now 25.7 or 25.8 is going to be stored in expense 1, and that's going to be the new highest value. Okay, and we actually need There's a couple ways we could do this, but I would say the easiest way right now, we're going to add in expense one index equals -1. No, don't do -1. That won't even make a difference anyways. We'll just start it at 0, just like the value. And when we change the value for expense one, we need to also change that. We need to keep track of that index. We might as well. We already know the index, so there's a couple ways you could just go find the index. But for the sake of like, you already know the index, let's go ahead and keep track of it. So in the index of the most expensive expense we found so far is I, right? That way, this is the important part. When we get out of all this, finding the two highest expenses, we know the index for these two descriptions. So, okay, so we found the highest expense, because that's going to loop through and find the highest one, which we'll find 1,000. Then what we're going to want to do is use a delete function. So this function, you can delete a whole list or you can delete an item from a list. So at this point, you could say delete. There's a couple things we can do to make this code better, but I don't want to get too caught in the nuance here. So delete. We'll say expend at I. Right? We want to get rid of it. But wait a minute. We don't want to modify that. That's not going to be great, because then we are like actually messing up our expense list, right? So what we actually want to do is make a copy. So if you import the module called copy, then down here, what I would do, in my code, I'd get this expense array and I'd say, okay, if that's the actual array, I'm just going to create one, called temp or something. It doesn't matter. And it's going to be a copy. Oh wait, I did that wrong. And we're going to copy expend, right? And then down here, I can say temp expend. And then down here, when I'm looping through things, let's actually use the temp expend instead of the actual one. So we're making copies, and then we're going to work with those copies and delete them. That way we don't accidentally mess up our actual list, right? We don't want to do that. So, okay. I think that looks good. See if it gives us any heck. Oh, actually, before we run it, one of the things we need to do is, it says while current expense is less than or equal to 2, we haven't upped our current expense. So if the expense is, well, really, we want to go through the whole list, because 25.8 might be greater than 18.7, but we need to go through the whole list so that we can find that 1,000 is actually the biggest number. So once we've looped through every possible value and found the largest one out of all of them, then we want to do current expense plus equals 1. Whoa, what's that? So these are nice little shorthand for doing some addition on a variable. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. You can look at it in the book if you want to. The idea is, plus equals 1 is the same as if you're trying to just add one to the variable and you're saying spam equals spam plus 1, then spam plus equals 1 is the same thing. It's the same thing for minus, multiplication, division, and modulus. So pretty nice. You don't have to use it. It makes no difference. It's just shorthand. Okay, so current expense equals current expense plus 1. And that will only run for while expense is 2. And the only other thing we need to check is, actually, since we have two different current expenses, if we say greater than expense 1, that should be fine because greater than expense 1. Let's just add in an and current expense equals 1. That way we only change this when we're working on the first expense. And we'll say elif expend, let's say temp expend. I'm just going to copy all this and we'll change it a little bit. Well, elif instead of if, right? We don't want two ifs because then they're both checked every time. If one's true, I don't really want to check the other one. So in this case, so temp expend at I is greater than expense 2 and current expense equals 2. Then we want to basically do the same thing as this, but with expense 2. Oops, don't delete, just copy. Okay. Expense 2. Expense 2. Okay, and then we don't want to delete it there. Yeah, that should work. Okay. Then if we print we need to do expense to index. Almost left that off. Okay. Let's just see if this runs. We already wrote way too much code. Okay. To not have ran it. I'd recommend writing less code and then being able to run it, but whatever. It worked. So we got 1025, which is the two highest values, which is perfect. So that was a lot to show you that basically by using the index here, right? Now we have this index, super useful. What we can do actually, I just realized we messed up. So if we, well, this might work. Well, let me just show you what's going to happen. First, let's just run the code and see what it does. So if we do expense 1 index, right? And then we index into description. I got ahead of myself. This is good. Okay. We have a little bit more of a complex problem here. Okay. So if we index into description, do the same thing. Basically, we're just trying to print the cost and then the description of the cost, right? Do the same thing for description for expense 2. Now watch this. It says 1,000 is rent and 25 is burgers. Well, that actually worked. But what I'm worried about is, so if I delete, this worked because the first value was here, right? So if I, basically what I'm worried about is if I delete a item, the index has changed. So if 1,000 would have been at the first index here and I deleted it, well then now the first index is technically 5.21. So then if I get the index for the next largest item, it's not going to be right. So I think we need to do it a different way. I was trying to kind of force in the usage of delete and copy just so you could see them. But let's see. I think we're just gonna have to do separate ifs, because basically, like, let me just show you what's gonna happen. If I move or let's just say I add another element here and I make it 2,043 cents for house, whatever, it doesn't matter. Now if I run that, it says 2000 was a house, and wait, 2000 was a house, top 2 most expenses. That's because it gets messed up, basically, because it finds the first one, keeps track of it as expense 1, deletes that thing, and then yep. It gets, the indexes get all messed up. So okay, well, dag nabbit, I'm gonna say this was a fun practice on using copy and delete, but let's not do that. Just do basically we're just going to keep the actual, instead of using the temp expand, we're going to use the real one, and we'll just add in another check, another if statement. You know, that's what we're going to do, because otherwise it gets weird. There's a million ways to do this, honestly. You might even be thinking of another way to do it, and there's no wrong way, as long as it works, really. As long as it works and it like genuinely works, and not just like it works for a very small use case. Like, well, if you only use it on these 2 things, it works. Like, well, that's not good. But if it generalizes and works for solving the problem, then hey, great. Okay, let's see. I just want to like run this again, make sure there's no errors, because I got rid of temp and everything. Okay, so all we're gonna do is add in, if expense is 1, then keep track of 1. Otherwise, our expense equals 2, and the expense is greater than expense 2. We're just gonna add on another and say, and this expense that we're looking at I does not equal expense 1. So as long as it doesn't equal expense 1, then it's something less than expense 1. We already know expense 1 is the largest, so just don't replace that again. And we got rid of delete, so we should be good now. Let's try running that. Yeah, see, that works. I think I might have overcomplicated it in the beginning, but I really just wanted you to see how delete works, or del, and how copy works. They're just useful. Not really particularly useful in this case. You can just add one and if I wanted to find the 3rd most expensive, literally all I would do is copy this, paste it. I could have another expense 3, right? I mean, super easy here. 3, add on a 3, current expense is 3, and expense doesn't equal 1, and all I'm going to do is say also expense does not equal I does not equal expense 2. Now wait a minute. Doesn't this look like something we could probably, honestly, I'm just going to leave it like that, but if we were going to go on and on, we could create a list and keep a list of all the expenses that we've already added, and we could say, and expense I is not in our list of expenses we've already added. So there's a perfect use case of a list right there. But this also works. So then down here, change that to a 3, change that to a 3, and all we have to do is print out, expense 3 down here. And description 3 index, and if we run that, now we get I don't know what happened, 0 for tacos. Expense 3, what do we do wrong? If expense at I is greater than expense 3, and the current expense equals 3, and the expense does not equal expense 1, and it doesn't equal expense 2. And it's getting 0. And it says tacos. It's like it's never getting updated. Oh, it's never getting updated because our while loop is while less than or equal to 2. We need to change that to 3. And now it will work. Okay. So now we've got 2,000 for the house, 1,000 for... Oh, dang it. I hate when that happens. 2,000 for the house, 1,000 for rent, and 25.8 for burgers. Okay. So, I mean, it's not pretty, but essentially you're seeing like how can we work with these lists, and I wanted to show you that. Okay. So real quick, you know, that's, I kind of want to show you a real use case, but now let's just look at briefly what are some of the other things you can do. So we have in, not in, for, right? We also have plus, so you can add 2 lists together. If you have a list that says 1, 2, 3, you can add them together. 4, 5, 6. I think that'll, you know, it's not going to show you, but if we print it, it'll be 1 list, right? There you go. Multiplication works just like a string, so, you know, if I times just like a string in the way that if you times it by something that doesn't make sense like this, it's not going to work. But if you times it by like 2, it'll just duplicate the list twice. That makes sense. You know, we talked about del, so if you have a list, say, you know, my list equals 1, 2, 3. If I say del my list at 1, that'll be the first index, then my new list should be 1 and 3, right? And that's what it is. If I say del my list, then the whole thing is gone. It doesn't know what I'm talking about. So you can delete the whole list, you can delete elements of the list, you can even delete slices of the list. So 1 through 2. Or let's do 0 through 2. What does that do? It stops, right? Just like with the other ways of using slice, it stops at the second index. So 0, 1, 2, the first 2 get deleted. If I want to delete the last element, I just negative index in. Now I only have 1 and 2 because negative 1 is the last index. Just like we saw with the range function, you can get the length of a list using len. How many items are in that list? Just use len. We got 3 because there's 3 items. Copy creates a copy. If you have a list within a list, you have to use what's called deep copy. But we're not going to look at that. Look it up if you need it. But copy is what you use if you want to make a copy. Just assign it, right? So, you know, my copy, right? Just like we were looking at a second ago. Copy, dot copy. And the parentheses, put in the list name you want to copy. And now you have a new copy of that list. Pretty nice. Okay, so those are the functions. Some of the major functions. Also, another one you want to look at is random. These are kind of useful. So if you have import random, and then what if you want to print a random, or you want to use a random element in your list? So you can actually do random.choice, and you provide it your list, and it will choose one. It's super awesome. So let's say if this was like 100, just to show you. 188, like 242, 320, whatever, just random numbers. It actually picks that element out. Like 342. Stop. 242. 242. 342. It's just random. So it's kind of cool. If you have a list, you can just randomly choose from it. You can also randomly shuffle your list. So if I shuffle, now this is something that if I just run this, I don't even have to put it in print. If I just say random shuffle my list, and then I print my list, it will have changed. Oh, now see, like 242 is the first element, 342 is next, 188 is last, because the list is passed by reference. So it's actually changed by me calling that. And that's in random. Okay, that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to dive into some of the methods that you can use on lists. Until then, thank you so much.